to notice.
You think this is funny?
Hey, thanks for listening to Slice of SciFi. I'm Noah Richmond.
And I'm Daren Gulsbeck.
And this is our review for Joker, the highly anticipated 2019 DC Universe release, directed by none other than Todd Phillips, who, when I first heard the name, I scratched my head and I said, who? But this is actually the director that did the Hangover movies?
The Hangover movies and just history of comedy. So quite a departure, of course, for Todd. You know?
Yeah. Considering that this is made by the person that did the Hangover films, it's pretty impressive, film work. I mean, it's like you would never have thought that this was somebody.
Well, the Hangover, at least the first one, I'm not going to count the last two. There was three of them, actually.
Yeah.
But it was actually had some dark moments in it. So, he did skate in that area. But of course, no one would I would never expect this director, writer to be awarded Joker. So let's not kid ourselves here.
Right. But I mean, I have to say, this film, I thought, I looked at it and it seemed to me like I would have thought that this was maybe like a Scorsese film in terms of just the craftsmanship, in terms of the way it builds this sense of claustrophobia, the descent into madness, and taking the audience along with the protagonist into that descent. The way everything has this grimy feel, it has this dark feel. It's also shot in a period way, so it kind of captures this era.
70s.
Yeah, I was thinking like late 70s, early 80s. Yeah. But it really does capture a kind of grit about it.
The one thing that actually really emphasized that this was a period piece, in the 70s, is that everyone freaking smoked. And of course, we were also the vehicles were, but other than the actual things that we equate to those time periods, it didn't feel necessarily like a movie that was, this would have been placed, in the 70s, but only because we had these visual cues to let us know that. But you're right, though, gritty. This thing is it was a very uncomfortable watch. So,
right.
But I think DC is at a point now where they're taking chances like this, and they've already proven that they can do dark. I am intrigued how this is going to be received in the common, how people, if they show up to watch it in droves, like DC needs.
Yeah, well, it is sort of taking things to the next level where we're no longer even having the superhero be the protagonist. Now it's actually the villain who is the protagonist, and you're kind of taking them and making this sort of very nihilist character front and center of what the story is all about.
Well, apparently nihilists themselves these days. But Suicide Squad proved that you could do that, at least from the gate receipts. Of course, you and I didn't like it, but I think this idea of now giving villains their own movie is, I guess, not going to be commonplace, at least with DC, because the Birds of Prey is coming out.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Well, and certainly Sony's doing that now with the Spider-Man properties.
Venom.
It's got the rights to. They've got a Morbius film coming out, a Kraven the Hunter film coming out.
Well, Morbius would be really cool, but Joker in itself, though, he's a strong character, and I think Todd Phillips directing Joker really that out of his comfort zone. I mean, he does comedy, and Joker has always been about, but there's an irony to that. So maybe that's why it works. And Todd Phillips felt comfortable doing this, and so. But man, this was an exhausting movie to watch, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just that this isn't your typical hero flick that you show up and then you leave and you're like, oh, cool. It was pretty. There were some really, really, really dark moments in the film, and I think were designed to make the movie experience uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I don't know how to say that. I mean, I just kind of say, if I'm a parent and I'm taking my kids or teenager or whatever, they just see the name Joker in DC, think it's just another superhero movie that they're going to be rudely shocked when they see what's at play. Because it actually felt a little too real to me at some moments. And I just think in this day and age that this type of movie is, I could see why somebody would question how far it does push.
Yeah. Well, certainly the film that I have been hearing it compared to is Taxi Driver, and I think that's a very apt comparison.
And let's not just beyond this fact that it could have been nice and directed nice, but Joaquin Phoenix is the one that really brought this into a whole new level. So, I mean, what did you think about his performance as Joker, since this is such a notorious role that actors love to play?
So here's where we're going to get into the difficulty about reviewing this particular movie.
Right.
Did I think that Joaquin Phoenix did a good portrayal of a mentally disturbed person spiraling further and further down into madness? Yes, I thought that that was very well portrayed. But calling this Joker and linking it directly into the Batman universe, that's where I do have issues with this movie, because to me it's real to the point where you're no longer actually talking about Batman and Joker anymore. So it's on one hand, I see what they're doing about let's make a Joker film that's a real psychological exploration, but to me, in a way, it's almost a cheat to call the end result Joker, because it's not really who this is.
Well, you know what? I was after the movie, and you're right. I mean, I felt, in fact, when we were watching the movie, I just remembered and said, I'm not feeling this, and that's when as far as a Joker movie, because Joker is totally aware of who he is and what he is. But of course, that just depends on which version of Joker you're reading and talking about. But in this, for the most part, the movie was just a reminder of watching somebody just fall into this pit of darkness, and then not even aware of his own reality. And that was the part I meant was uncomfortable to watch. But the whole time I'm watching this, and wouldn't that be cool if like when they released Batman, we're getting like what they did with Iron Man 3, with Ben Kingsley playing the villain, and it was like the big haha. This really wasn't the Joker. If his actions promoted something to happen, and then you have the real Joker come out, I don't know. I just the whole time it was uncomfortable because Joaquin Phoenix did such a great job of portraying somebody dealing with mental illness. So I'm just hoping this is one of these movies where it's the big wool. It's like, oh, but this was really not the Joker. This was influencing the Joker to come out. I mean, I don't know. That's a well wish on my part, because this was an enjoyable movie from the point of watching a person deal with mental illness, and then that's really the footnote of this movie. It's dealing with mental illness, and just behind the fact that we're calling this person sick the Joker. But if you didn't tell me this was the Joker in going to this movie, I wouldn't even know this was the Joker. Right. It just looked like a guy who was putting behind clown makeup, because that was kind of ironic as how he viewed himself in society, but more or less we had these little story pinpoints jumping in that, oh yeah, this is taking place in the timeline for Batman. We're in Gotham City. We see Bruce Wayne's as a kid, and so these little things that reminds us that we're supposed to be here, but it just never quite felt like that. It was almost felt like it was shoehorned in. Yeah. And so I don't know. From a point of a Joker movie, I didn't enjoy it, but from a movie for a powerful example of how mental illness can destroy somebody, it was powerful.
One other factor, and this I think is an actual knock on the film that you and I have talked about, I think both agree. So it does a good job of showing circumstances that lead to this person who's mentally unstable becoming really unmoored. And it does create, some sympathy for how this comes about. But then it takes, again, this is where it's a real weakness tying it into the Batman films. Suddenly, Batman's father, the figure that,
right.
is suddenly like basically completely a villain.
And he's comes across as a jackass, man.
There's nothing human about him at all. He is a cartoon character thrown into the middle of this. And so it's still, although the film certainly does a much better job than something like Maleficent, which Maleficent just completely turns everything on its head and says, well, no, the real, the bad guy is the real good guy and the good guys are the real bad guys. This doesn't completely do that, but it does tread in those waters a bit. And I think it was a weakness of the film that it's taking something that's an established story with the Batman being a good guy who he has got a lot of money and he's very generous with it and he fights for goodness and justice, and to sort of make that
well, it's like taking the legacy of the Wayne family and the philanthropy that they do, and it just discredit that. In fact, there was like an underlying message that, because he inspires riot, and it's just like, I don't know, it just goes against the grain of the way the story has always been told. And I'm not saying you can't change things, but the sake of doing it to make, I don't know, it's kind of dangerous in this time. Where you take somebody who does something so awful, and you almost like glorify it. Like doing what he did was like celebrated, and if anything, it's kind of ironic, and maybe it's Todd Phillips' design all along, is to use Joker as kind of a iconic figurehead to what's really going on in society. But I mean, that's a whole nother route. But I'm just saying, taking firsthand as a comic book movie, it just didn't feel like this was pulled from the Joker, from the Batman universe, and I don't know, Todd Phillips maybe doesn't know as well versed in the Batman lore and Joker and so forth.
Right. Yeah. Again, I think that's where we're both agreeing is that there's things in there that are actually weakened by bringing the Batman universe into it. Yeah,
but I'd like to, I know you kind of laid that out, but I like to ask questions as to why, because it was one of these movies that I was enjoying it. But then I'm always, the thing that kept on holding it back is, but this is a Joker movie, and it was almost, if it wasn't called Joker, I'd probably have a totally different outlook on this movie and review. But then again, I probably wouldn't have watched it either, because, I mean, I don't.
I will say I do get the feel that it's probably captured a certain zeitgeist of our time.
Yeah.
I do think that this is going to be a very successful release.
For the wrong reasons. I don't know. Will it have the legs to go on? I mean, I suspect that Joaquin will be probably given some awards for this. I mean, some might argue that he's a little over the top in his his acting of Joker, or his interpretation of it, but he's definitely interesting to watch in the movie. Some of the really ECUs, close-ups that they do were a little exhaustive after a while, and the way they chose to emote emotion with Joker. I think sometimes the choice of the shots that they moved in the movie were designed, obviously, to make the experience very unsettled and stuff. But at some point, it became a little gimmicky,
Right.
An extreme close-up on it every time Joker is like having this feeling or reaction.
Right.
So I don't know. I think, to summarize though, Marvel and DC are obviously going in different directions. I think just judging from darkness, I mean, I don't think Marvel has actually released such a dark movie like this. I mean, that I can at least remember.
Right.
That's such a difficult movie to watch.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I again see it, but with the understanding that don't expect the expected. If that makes sense. So.
All right. Anyway, I think that's our thoughts on Joker. Thanks for listening to Slice of SciFi.
See ya.